All right, live here for the Lucas Grandsire podcast. We're back and we've got a big guest here today, of course, a reporter for the New York Post, Andrew Marchand. What's going on, sir? How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
You have an extremely unique beat. Like, everybody says you have to find your niche and stuff like that, but for you, is it fair to say you're sports media covering sports media?
It's exactly right. It's kind of weird that way, right? Well, now you're interviewing me, so I'm sports media covering sports media. Now you're covering sports media covering sports media. Uh, so yeah, I happen to have a passion for it. I love the business. I love sports too. But as I've gotten into this, I've been doing it now a pretty long time. This is definitely my favorite thing to cover.
So how does that kind of happen? Like, I know for me, I like the media side of things because as media myself, I'm using it to research and help me improve. Is that kind of similar for you, or did you have your own way of sort of getting fascinated with it?
Yeah, I think when I was younger, even as a kid, I always was very interested. Like, how do you make it in this business? Like I didn't have anybody who I knew who was really in the business growing up, and so I was just kind of, how can I do it? Like I kind of realized at a young age, I was a pretty good athlete, but I just knew I was going to be a professional athlete. Pretty young, I had that realization. But so how do I make it? And so I kind of was always into that. And then when I went to college, I went to Ithaca College. I was a sports journalist, excuse me, a broadcast journalism major. And I worked on the school newspaper, a lot of radio, a little TV. Um, and I did a lot of internships. And so, when I started to be able to meet people and reach out to people, I always just like, how'd you make it? And then one thing you do realize pretty quickly is that there's no blueprint. It's not like becoming, a lot of professions, right? Like, if you want to become a doctor, you go to medical school. It's pretty, obvious like how you kind of get there. This isn't really like that. And so, but you try to make a game plan and, try to, make things work. And so that really kind of got me into like, or how did this person get to where they are, and how can I get there?
What was the most helpful thing that you were told when you asked that question? Because I know when I started MMA, that was the big question you asked people: How do I get discovered? And everybody's the same thing: find your niche, find your thing, find what makes you unique. Which sounds really easy when you say it like that, but once you dig into it, it's really complicated. What was the most helpful answer you got out of those questions?
Well, this is more when I was working. I would say Joel Sherman, who's a baseball columnist for the Post on MLB Network, one of the best columnists in the country. He gave me, when I covered the Mets, I was 25. I got the Met beat. Um, and he told me, make 5 calls a day. And I think that's the best advice. If I was in college, and I wanted to be in this business or in high school, you can really reach people through email, through DMing. Again, you don't want to be annoying about it. There's a fine line between reaching out, but like reporting is doing the right thing 50 times and it works out twice. It works out 3 times. The better you get at it, it kind of adds up because you have more sources. You could become more of someone people want to talk to. But still, there's a lot of like, it's kind of like baseball. A lot of, where you kind of go after something and it's not there, even though you think it might be. And so I'm not saying you should call 5 people a day. I'm saying you should reach out to 5 people a day. And if you start doing that when you're in college, if someone's out there listening and you reach out, out of those 5 people a day, which adds up, you can take weekends off. That's 25 a week. A lot of people want to help you, right? They want to get back to you. They don't have to have a connection. If somehow you have a connection, that's even better. To get them to get back to you. And some people won't get back to you. Some people, and some people are very busy. I mean, there are times where I'm really busy and I try to return an email and say, hey, this isn't a good time. Please try me again, this time, if they seem sane. Uh, you know, so um, so yeah, but you add up 25 times, let's say you take a couple weeks off, 50, start adding up. That's a lot of people. And then when you start moving on, you try to get an internship or you try to get a job. You start knowing all these people and there's little connections. And so I did 7 internships when I was in college. The last 2 were at WFAN in New York City, the all sports station, and WCBS News Radio under Ed Ingles, who was a great mentor and really was very helpful in terms of giving advice and really taking an interest in interns who he had. And so uh, that's what I so if you said the best piece of advice, that's the thing I would say is to try to reach out. And then at the same time, this is just as important, you have to keep honing your craft. You got to get good. So, you want when that opportunity comes, you want to be ready for it. And I was it was very helpful for me. I went to very small newspapers for a year and a half in Texas. One was called the Liberty Vindicator outside of Houston. Another one was called the Texas City Sun. And it was in Galveston County, covered high school football, and that was great. So when I got to the Post, I had confidence in how I like how I wrote an article because I was a kind of like one man show, and so that experience and doing everything was very helpful.
So you mentioned reaching out to people without being annoying. How did you kind of figure out that balance? I know for myself, like, I'm reaching out to people for the podcast, fighters to come on and do interviews. And you do think about that. Like, am I being annoying? Am I respecting their time? How did you sort of figure out that balance without being annoying while at the same time, like, you want people to take you seriously?
Yeah, well, look, you can only I would tell you that this is kind of true for life. You can only control your output, right? What they input or their view, that's not. So to me, you want to be concise. You don't want to send a long email to people. They just don't, just like a turn off. You want that email to be as short as possible. You need some information in there, so it needs to be, to the point and quick. And look, you could have like a form that you use, but you need to switch it up maybe a little bit so it does feel like you put a little care into it. You're not just sending out a form letter, so it's just kind of off-putting if it just says dear sir, dear ma'am, what I mean, that kind of thing. It just doesn't seem like, well, you're just sending these out in mass. You're not really interested in a career. And I also would say that it's very important that now look, I'm telling you to do mass, like reach out to mass people, but it's also very important if there's people you really like, people you really respect, and you really are very curious how did they get to their spot in their careers. I think emphasizing that, because again, not everyone's like this, but a lot of people want to help. They want to help you get to where you want to go, because first off, again, most people are good. They want to do that. It feels good. Like they help you become a big star, and like, oh yeah, you know what? I gave Lucas some advice back in the day. Now he's the biggest thing going. That that it feels good. You know what I mean? That's important.
I'm sure you get a lot of emails, like you mentioned, from people that want advice and stuff. How do you sort of decipher who's serious about it and who's just, sending you an email just because, hey, they might think it's a fun thing to do sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, like obviously a lot of them come from friends of friends, right? Or somebody my family knows or whatever, who are like, oh, that um, I if I don't know somebody at all, no connection, like first, I get an email and then let's just email for a little bit so I could just see that it's not I don't, I'm busy like everyone else. So you don't want to just get on the phone and be on for an hour and someone's just like, oh, I really like sports. I think the one thing you do find is a lot of people are like, I really like sports and I'd like to do that. And that's, obviously the first thing that basically all of us who are in sports, that's how you get into sports, because you love sports and you think, wow, that'd be a great way to make a living. And it is. But I always say this, I don't have a job, but I work hard. Right. Like, so, I mean, I have a job in the sense like I have to make money to feed my family and everything. So, you know what I mean? That's a job, like everyone else. But this isn't really I'm writing about sports media, talking about sports media. I'm very fortunate and lucky. That said, you have to work hard to do well. If you really want to make it, you want to have that goal and then go after it and make it. So that's what, so I guess the point being is that, um, they're going to first off pay you in sports, right? So when you first get into it, you're not going to make, you come out of college, you might have friends who get jobs, in business or lawyers or whatever. They're going to make a lot more money than you. And you're going to work just as hard, if not harder than them, and you're going to make a lot less, right? I mean, you just don't make a lot of money unless you're really fortunate, but almost, nobody really makes a lot of money coming out of college doing this. And so that can be frustrating. And you wonder, well, is this worth it for me? And that's where you kind of, where it's difficult. You know what I mean? Some people don't have the means, which that makes it more difficult. So it's, but you have to, but it takes work. Like if you want to do it, it's not just like, oh, I like sports, it's different. Like it's just different. Like when you cover, like when I cover the Yankees, for example, yes, that's a great job. But when you're off, you need to know what's going on with the Yankees. And I understand people are like, well, you got to watch it. Yeah, I know, but you have other things you might want to do, considering you just spent, 2 weeks on the road. But you need to know. You need to. So days off, you're kind of. And again, cry me a river. I'm not saying that's like the worst thing ever, but if they ask you to go on the radio and you don't, you need to know everything that happened the night before. It can't be like, oh well, I was off, so I don't know. It's no, it's that's not the expectation. The expectation is and I get it. People might be listening, and be like, oh, I'd love to watch every game. It's different when it's your job as opposed to your something you love to do. It's a different experience, and um, and you just can't be wrong. So there's a lot to it. So I guess the point being is that it's fun. At first, they're going to pay you with fun, and your person who's collecting your rent's not going to let you pay in fun. They're going to want actual money, and so that's hard. But it's it can be worth it.
So at what point did you realize in your career like sports media is something that you can cover and there is an appetite for it? Because we know a lot of people they want to do specific things. There's no traffic. But for you, obviously there is a demand for it. What point did you kind of realize that in your career?
When I was younger, when I was first at the Post, I covered the Mets. And I before I covered the Mets, I was like 23, maybe 23. I covered media as well. And then we have Phil Mushnick, is one of the best sports media columnists ever. He was there, and he was very supportive. And I could tell there was traction. It's hard to like. Sometimes it's hard to get and my bosses could tell there was traction. The internet was there, but it wasn't as big as it is now, of course. And so yeah, so there was definitely impact, but then I went to ESPN for 11 years. Like they came after me, and so I went there for 11 years, and that was a great experience. And I kind of could tell where the world was going. I mean, they came after me, so I actually wanted to stay. I didn't necessarily really want to go. I liked what I was covering. I was covering media, but and just the financially it was just a better move for me that I needed to make at that point in my life. And it was a great opportunity, and then they treated me really well, and I have no regrets. But you have contracts there, and when my contract was up, I would look into can I cover sports media again. And it took a while. Every time my contract was up, it took a while for that actually to happen. But yeah, I think if there's an interest. I mean, we have it on the back page at times. We can see the numbers, which also helps. It helps to prove it. Before there was the internet, there was always this feeling, well, only the people in the media like it, and really, that's not true. On a lot of, first off, like take the NFL transactions that I've read, TV transactions. You're writing about Peyton Manning, you're writing about Troy Aikman, Tony Romo, and not to mention the Joe Bucks and Al Michaels, who also are very well known and people have big opinions on. But look at the football players. You're talking about $1 billion deals for the NFL TV deals or MMA deals. I mean, these are billion with a B dollar deals. There's interest in that, and where they're going to be, and how can I watch them? And so, but still, I don't think if there was the internet, people would still be like, do people really care? Because when you just got the hard copy of the paper, you couldn't tell who read what. But people read this, they're interested in it. And I think when you really break it down, it's kind of obvious why they'd be interested in it.
And so we did see, I believe it was a few months ago, you kind of ventured into the MMA world a little bit where you came out and started reporting about Ariel Helwani. I think a lot of people were surprised because usually no one really cares about the MMA media. How did that story kind of get on your radar?
Well, I mean, I knew with everything with him and Dana White, that was an issue. And now UFC is under ESPN's umbrella. So that was number one. I think there was first off an incident, if I can't recall exactly, there was something happened. Oh yeah, where there's like the Ariel said something about something with anti-Semitism, and like there was a whole thing with Dana White, and he spoke out against him. So that kind of was the start of it. And then, a lot of times, like I'll find out, if people's contracts are up, and I just kind of knew that one was going to be kind of hairy. And I also knew that a guy like that with his following can, there's a new world now where you don't need ESPN necessarily to make more money than you're making there, and they pay well. So someone like Helwani was of interest. And he kind of crossed over. I mean, I think if you look at his social following, So yeah, that one, so yeah, I don't, what I cover, I can kind of go where the story is. I mean, it's interesting because let's say like compared to like an MMA fight, right? Or I used to cover baseball a lot. Like baseball, let me just use that; it's easier for me. Baseball, it's just in front of you a lot of days, right? There's a game in front of you. Aaron Judge hits a 3-run home run. Okay, you're right, Aaron Judge. What I write is not in front of you, right? So um, I have to find it and then see where it goes. And yeah, that was an interesting story for sure because there's a lot there. And MMA is though legit, man. I don't know if is it a mainstream sport? Can we argue about what the top four sports are? Top five when you include soccer, along with hockey, and then the big three of baseball, basketball, and then football, which is king. Where does MMA figure into that? I mean, I think it's been very important for ESPN Plus. So it's going to grow in more importance. And so I think there's interest. I think the internet also changes things, like in terms of where the interest is. Like it just, things that are popular on the internet are kind of sometimes are stories that do really well. And again, we don't look, we do our, do the stuff with the rewriting, all that stuff. So obviously we're trying to get as many people to read our stories as well. But we have we have a huge staff and we do a lot of firsthand reporting, but it's not like this is going to get clicks. Let's do this. It's more of, is this a good story? I mean, we obviously aren't opposed if we think something's going to do really well and it's going to be well read. That's of course something that's of interest. But so that one just got on my radar and away we went. And then it was interesting because you would think that would have been someone ESPN wanted to keep. As a person, someone they'd want to keep, and then they did not.
Before I let you go, though, I have to know this a little bit. We're seeing more and more. I feel like in sports media, like people are realizing, and you touched on it a little bit. You have to create your brand. Like it's no longer relying on the outlet. That's your brand. That's where you're known from. And we saw it mentioned it with Ariel, where he could work at all these different places. How important do you think that's becoming, creating your own brand rather than maybe relying on the outlet to put your name out there?
Yeah, I would say this if I was saying, I would say do good work, right? I think people get a little too like, yeah, I mean, look, there definitely is a brand that you have, but you're like all you have is your reputation, right? So at the end of the day, whatever it is, if you're like in the opinion space, if you're in the information space, first do a good job. Now, are there people who are self promoters better than others? Yeah, that is something. But like if Woj or an Adam Schefter, like right, they can be like they're really good at finding out information. But more so Schefter's, been sort of something's in the news a little bit, but at the end of the day, like he's going to do well if he breaks more stories. That's where his bread's going to be buttered. And that's where his reputation is going to be. And do you look to him for those type of stories? And can you trust him? So I guess to answer your question, yeah, your brand is important, but when you align it with something you are passionate about, and then you do the best job you can, that's where the brand kind of comes together, right? I don't think it's like here's my brand. Let me find where my brand should go. It's more of this is what I do, and then you kind of, for lack of a better term, you create your brand.
All right, well, that's fascinating stuff. There's so much people can, pick up from this and use themselves. One last thing, man, before we let you go, you have a podcast. You obviously work at the New York Post. If you have anything social media you want to plug, now would be the time.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I mean the big thing is a couple of things is that we have the Marchand and Orion Sports Media Podcast, which is available wherever you find podcasts. John Oran from the Sports Business Journal and we talk sports media every week. And then you can find me at newyorkpost.com. And I also have a newsletter, which is a premium product that we have called New York Post Plus, or New York Post Sports Plus, a little bit of a mouthful. And that's $4.99 per month. It's not just me, you get others as well. A little extra coverage of, kind of inside the biz. So anyways, I appreciate it, man. And best of luck to you. And hopefully you got more big things on the horizon.
Yes, sir. Hopefully, for all the people who made it to the end, congratulations to you. Not everybody always makes it to the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Andrew, thank you so much for the